Hello and welcome back. It's Roger Royce, host of the 10,000 Startups podcast. I'm also a partner in emerging growth and venture capital with the law firm of Haynes Boone, resident in Palo Alto. And today we're going to drill down a little bit on an aspect of trade secret law that I talk a lot about because I work with tech companies. And today we're going to drill down a little bit more on the obligation that a company has, or any owner of a trade secret has, to take reasonable steps to protect the secrecy of its trade secrets. And in the legal world, of course, that means NDAs, that means employee confidentiality agreements, et cetera. But it goes beyond that. It requires good trade secret policies and also good practices. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the practices in how to protect trade secrets, especially from cyber theft, which is getting to be such a huge problem in this country and worldwide. So we have with us today Truman Roe. He's the CEO of True Technical Partners, Inc. It's an outsource CIO, which I assume means Chief Information Officer, that guides technology advancements and helps the company compete and protects data from cyber criminals in today's competitive business environment. So I want to thank you for being here, Truman, and I'm really excited to hear myself what steps we should all be taking, and I should be telling my clients they should be doing.
Excellent. Perfect, Roger. Yeah, there's the hardest part is, what do you protect and what's important to protect? And the most important part is being able to detect if you are in the process of, of a potential breach, or, are your most, as we call them, the company jewels, the intellectual properties, their trade secrets. Those are the jewels of the company. And those are the things that you really need to focus on to be able to protect. And there's a few different ways to do that. And we can probably—
let's talk about that. What are best practices to protect the company secret?
Yeah, you know what? Well, then best practice is, I think that it also starts with the company culture. To be able to talk to your employees, let them know about how important their trade secrets are, and how to protect them. There's also, in some instances, in which you do a lot of startups, there's a lot of compliance issues that need to be met. And a lot of those compliance issues are government regulations. And to be able to take care of those. So I'm not going to get into the legal part, because that's not any of my part. That's yours. That's why everybody trusts you, Roger. Then your business. But getting into implement access controls. So, we have some customers say, oh, well, I want this person to have administrative rights to everything. Well, that's not the way it's really done. Implementing access controls is limiting the access to the confidential information on a need-to-know basis. So you don't give the employees all of the access, all of your information. You distribute it, and they have certain rights to be able to get into file servers and electronic servers. You need to, with password protection.
Let's pause on that for a second, because I think that's really important. And so I think what I'm hearing you saying is that it's pretty rare that you're going to give every employee or any employee the right to everything, right?
Absolutely, Roger. You're right.
So I always tell people, despite all of this paper, this very elegant, beautiful paper I can put in place, when an employee walks out the door, if you're not careful, your trade secrets might walk out the door also.
Completely.
And one way to keep that from happening is to say, look, employee A, you get to see this little piece of it. Employee B, you get to see this little piece of it, etc.
Yes, that's the ideal way to do it, Roger, because a lot of they don't need to get into some of the bones of the company. They don't need that. And everybody thinks, oh, okay, well, I'm out in the cloud. Well, then it's protected. No, it's not. You need to really protect the endpoints. And with people working from home and working remotely, you need to be able to protect those endpoints. And that's one of the most important parts. But to your point is, you just mentioned if a person leaves. So that's when you really also have to protect the company, is to let me see, how's the best way to do it? I'm trying to do it, easier for, to understand it is, um, you have to offboard those employees who leave. There's a lot of people that you go in and, oh, their email's still active. They haven't done, just real simple things that people don't think of. They say, okay, that person's gone. Well, what are we limiting their access to? They have access to still the email servers. They still have, can they get in and do other things? So offboarding a employee is very critical as it is to onboarding a employee. So
That's
those
a
are things that you really need to pay close attention to.
Yeah, really good point. So once somebody's no longer employed, blocking access to the system. And my clients, they typically, if they provide a company provided laptop, they get that back right away. Because that's where a lot of this stuff might be stored. And by the way, for anybody who's on the other side of this, any employee, you should just assume that everything you've done is 100% transparent, and everything you put on that laptop is going to be viewed by your employer because they're going to get it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what? And that's another good point, Roger, because so many people talk about, well, I don't want to carry two cell phones. I don't want to, I have a personal computer that I want to use instead of instead of a company issued. That's a big mistake, because now you get into, and you could probably talk more to this, Roger, is how do you get those files backed up on a personal computer?
Hmm.
What files do you get backed up? What's critical information? What personal devices are being used? Are those personal devices, do they have security software on it? Are they
Yeah.
encrypted? Is that laptop encrypted? Because if it does get stolen, well, you need to make sure that that laptop is encrypted so they can't get into the data.
Yeah, well-advised companies will have a PDA policy,
Yes.
personal device policy. And for example, just like my iPhone has got all of my Haynes Boone, protection on it. There's a kind of a big case last year of a big law firm in New York where this is a little off topic, but not really, where somebody walked into a Starbucks, went onto their phone, pulled up some documents on a deal they're working on. And once you know, the next day the deal's in the papers and it screws up the stock price. Big lawsuit, big
Yeah,
lawsuit. It's like you
exactly.
should have known better, to make that all available. But fortunately, we use VPNs and stuff like that, so I have less risk of that happening.
Yeah.
So
Well,
talk
you know
about,
what? That's another point. I mean, you can't trust a public internet.
yeah.
So be very, very, I always say just like as you just said, use a VPN. Okay, it's a little bit more um
Can you
cumbersome, I guess,
explain what that
for
is
some.
for the folks, just in case? It's hardly ever that I feel like I know something technical that somebody else might not, but this might be a case.
Yes. Well, I think that, there are protocols that the company needs to put in place, and will actually help with and develop all of those protocols so that we help the companies, if it is a BYOD, if it is work from home information, because you know what, a lot of the problems are working from home. They don't have the firewalls, the security pieces in place that you would at a corporate office. So you have to make sure that the home environment is as safe as it is in an office. And, there's sometimes, does the employee let other people from home use that computer? There's another issue. So, I think knowing those within cultures, putting in implement access controls. I think also conducting a confidential information training, like awareness training. Uh,
Mhm.
what are you looking? I mean, it's very simple. It's, and a lot of the awareness training comes into what are hackers doing now? That's what vendors are helping you with.
Yeah,
Uh,
so that brings me to the next thing. We're talking a little
sure.
bit about trade secret protection, but I think it also extends to protecting from cyber criminals. And I think you're
Absolutely.
just starting to get into best practices with security. And now you mentioned one is training, because that's probably the weakest part of the whole system is the person behind the keyboard, right?
Absolutely. Yes, that's your weak point. And they also, and hackers play on the on the employees. It's interesting. I was at a customer site or a potential customer, and the IT manager said, "Hey, I don't need any of your help." And I had made an appointment to go see the CEO. And it was interesting. I was sitting there and I looked on his credenza in the back, and he had this, I got to tell you, a beautiful 67 Corvette. And I'm a big the muscle car freak. And I asked him, I go, "Hey, is that a 67?" And he goes, "Yeah." So we were talking, and the IT manager there was going, "Hey, we don't need your help." I said, "Okay." I said, so I just started talking to the CEO, and I said, "Hey, do you have a hard time finding parts?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "If you got an email and you said, 'Hey, I can get you parts for your 67 Camaro, Corvette,' well then, would you click that?" He goes, "Absolutely, because I'm always looking for parts." I go, "There's a phishing attack. You are now been hacked."
Can we pause on that for just a second? Because coincidentally, my daughter was lecturing me about this last week. She said, you can download something malicious merely by opening the email. You don't have to download the attachments. And I said,
Exactly.
"Really?" She says, "Yeah, remember the I love you virus? So is that true? Just by opening an email, you can invite an invader into your computer?"
Absolutely. Roger, well, then that's why you should set your emails to not, well, then to when you click that email on, you have to download the pictures.
Mm.
That when you click your email, sometimes everything just opens up.
Hmm.
There's a setting in the Microsoft that you do not allow that to happen, that you have to go in, and it's kind of cumbersome, but you go down and you download the image.
Hmm.
if you trust if you trust who the sender is. And that's why I think awareness training is very critical, because it shows you what to look for, and
Hmm.
what, hover over something, see what link is really coming from. I
Hmm.
got an email from my wife, and she says, "Hey, I need some help with direct deposit." I'm going, "Direct deposit? What's she talking about?" So I hovered over her name, and it was a complete different email
Oh,
coming in. If I would
wow.
have downloaded that image, I don't know what would have happened. So I just deleted. So what I did is I blocked it, made it as a spam, and so forth. So you know what? Your daughter is 100% correct. You don't need, if you open up an email and it automatically comes and opens up, you don't have to go click anything else. It's already been established. So she's right.
Yeah.
So
So,
setting
so
that up to have to download the image is the best way to protect yourself against that.
well, I learned something already today. So I'm gonna look at that.
We
Uh,
learn something every single day. It's great.
Yeah, there are so many different ways that a person can get in trouble with technology, and we could talk all day about all the different scams, and, but here's one I'll tell you about. You might not have heard about. This happened to somebody close to me, where he got a call from his father's phone number. And the guy said, "Look, I'm a kidnapper. I'm in your father's house. Send me Bitcoin right now. You'll never see him again." Well, it turned out they were somehow able to just spoof the phone number. A call after he sent the Bitcoin to investigate, turns out that call came from a Mexican prison. And it's
Oh,
like, who would even think that's possible? Which
yeah.
brings me to the question, how can companies even keep up with all of these different scams and changes in technologies and ways that the bad guys can get you?
Yeah, and that's the thing, Roger. It's very, very difficult. And now there's another issue is with AI. AI, they can make an image look like you. They can make it sound like you. They can send voicemails off and say, "Hey, this is what I'm doing." And that's why I also always tell people, do not, well, it's kind of hard to say, but I don't, I never put out of office, because a hacker will see that you're out of office. So then what will then they will know how that you're gone, they could contact Liz, just say it's a C-level person, and they say, hey, I'm send a email to accounting. Hey, I'm out on the road. I'm doing this. I'm here. I need this amount of funds sent to this account. Immediately will inform me to close business.
Mhm.
What happens? It goes out the door.
Yeah,
Gone.
well, the one time that I was hacked, about 10 years ago, the attack started. It was basically a phishing attack. They got into my email and emailed everyone in my contacts.
Yep.
And I just sat down to start a 2-hour panel for the ABA business law section. Ironically, the topic was the duty of technical competence. And they knew I was going to be offline for 2 hours.
Yes.
And and I opened my email after the 2 hours. I had thousands and thousands of emails had been sent.
Absolutely.
It was like that, very clever. So AI you mentioned. Now that's interesting. So you said the bad guys are using AI to help with
Yeah.
these attacks. Can't the good guys use AI to help stop them? And have we got AI wars now going on?
Yeah. Well, then you do have AI wars going on right now. And it is, you know what, you can use AI on some issues to be able to counteract that. You can see when AI writes a lot of different programs to be able to see where that access is coming from. So who's pinging you? That also is part of our service where we have what we kind of call eyes on the screen, to where we are seeing what type of emails are coming in, who's pinging you. Is it coming from outside sources? What are those IP addresses? Those are some of the things. But AI is developing that they can actually shut some of those things down automatically before it goes any further. Well, then, so it doesn't really get to your inbox. We've already shut that down, and we have detected that is a potential. I guess you want to call it hacker.
Yeah.
We call it a lot
So,
worse, but yeah, those are some of the things. So we help develop those incident response plans, which that's the biggest concern within that I'm finding from a lot of my customers is, what do I do if I do get hit with a ransomware? What are
well,
my
let's ask about that. How big is that threat?
oh
You're
big
someone who's in the industry. You do this day in and day out every day. Is
yeah.
it overstated? Is it exaggerated? How big is the threat? Let me
You
just
know
see.
what, ransomware is really a big situation because everybody thinks, oh well, then nobody wants to come, well then nobody's going to come after my data because I'm too small. Well, the hackers look at it this way. Okay, am um, I might not make the news of where I just hit up a company and I'm hitting them for $50 million ransom. But the low hanging fruit is where um, they find a lot of money. Think about this, Roger, that small, medium businesses, startups, they don't have the infrastructure as a Microsoft or a Cisco or some of these big companies to protect themselves and have a huge cybersecurity budget to be able to put all of this in place. But if you send out a email and you're fishing for, hey, here's a discount at Nordstrom, and a person says, oh, well, what is that? Click. Well, there's the phishing attack. Now they're in your system. They can now start locking down systems. So the thing about small medium business is that they go, well, I can't afford to give them $4 million, but a hacker looks at it this way: I'm going to go after the small medium business, low hanging fruit, and if I can um, do a ransomware attack on them, say, hey, I'll give you back your data for $10,000. And somebody says, well, one, FBI, everybody says don't pay the ransomware. And the way that you get around that is make sure that you have internal systems and procedures in place, backups, honeypots, all of these different types of ways to be able to um, uh, detect a hacker. And that's the number one thing. Protection is good, but detection is the best. So anyways, well, then what happens is that they say, okay, I'll pay the $10,000. Well, what happens if a hacker, and all they do is send out these massive emails of potential phishing attacks, and what if they hit 10 a day? Well, they just made $100,000.
Hmm. Yeah.
So they know that the small, medium businesses are easy to go after, and it's a big payday for them.
Yeah. Let me shift gears a little bit
Sure.
here, because let's suppose that the company has engaged you or someone like you, and we've got all these super duper protections in place, and the system is secure as modern technology will allow. But you know what? We got third-party vendors, and they've got access into our system, and or they're using our data, or I mean, how do we know? How can we trust those third parties? Because now they're looking at our IP.
Yeah, you know what, Roger? Here's a interesting little bit of information. We deal with a lot of customers who deal with the Department of Defense.
Hmm.
All of those vendors need to be able to have certain protocols and certain cybersecurity pieces in place, or they can't do business with the Department of Defense. They won't allow them. So we follow very strict NIST protocols,
Hmm.
and they're not complicated. I mean, we can make sure within that all of them are followed. But if you remember the years ago, when Target got hit and all that data got stolen, that was through their HVAC vendor.
Oh,
They hacked the HVAC and they got into Target through that process. So that's how they did it. So the topic you just brought up is solid. That's what people look at. So not that you just have to make sure that your vendor, I mean, that you are secure. You got to make sure that your vendors are secure. And it's as simple as we can run very simple, well, not simple, but it's not invasive. Um, um, with analytics and testing their system to see where some of their vulnerabilities are, and that's through running a vulnerability test through their systems. Um, so that is a big issue, and that's something within that every customer should say, what are my vendors? What access do my vendors have to my critical data? So we go back to the other part is educating people about, and well, then to be able to not give them open access to everything that they have.
yeah. Well, there you go. I guess that's yeah, that's the answer. And and just kind of to add to what you're saying about the consequences, it's not only because you started off talking about the compliance issues, and just to circle back to that, it's not only the damage to the company and to its customers and to its revenue base and its reputation when this happens, but there are pretty significant legal consequences. The FTC has quite famously, gone after companies that have allowed a data breach and as an FTC violation. It's an unfair trade or whatever theory they have. You shouldn't have let this happen. You now have liability to us, the federal government. And we'll do another podcast on that whole aspect of it. I mean, California has its own set of rules, as
Yes,
I'm sure you know, when there's a data breach that we have to comply with, and you get a very short window of time to do it.
very
Uh,
short.
but for today, I guess I just really wanted to focus on what should companies do so they can say we've acted reasonably in protecting our trade secrets. Because remember, to get trade secret protection, the secret, it has to be secret, it has to be valuable, and you got to take reasonable steps to protect it.
Right.
So, any parting words for us, Truman, on this topic?
No, I mean, Roger, well then you said it. We could go on for hours talking about this, and it seems frightful, but it's not. If you do your due diligence and you manage what applications people are downloading, what are they using on their private devices. There's a lot of times where you go and you will go to your Google or your Apple, and that's where a lot of hackers sit. So they'll make software that, oh, I want to try that software, and it's really a piece of software that will hack your systems. So there's a lot of things in there. So I think training is important. I think watching where you let people access your data. I think that monitoring and doing your patch management, uh, um, solid backup procedures, endpoint protection. I think that if you're doing those types of things, you can limit your business risk. Not everybody. How should I say it? It isn't a huge costly endeavor either. You can really be able to do the amount to kind of to let people know I've done as much as I can. So data stolen. I put all of these protocols in place. I think that knowing the way that you are, showing the whole legal ramifications, making sure that your customers are doing things correctly. That's your specialty. That they're all lined up to be efficient.
And your specialty is making sure that it happens. So
Yeah, exactly.
okay.
But no, that's about it, Roger. I appreciate the time
All right.
to talk to you about this.
No, thank you for being here. This is Roger Roy's 10,000 Startups podcast. We've been talking with Truman Roe, who does cybersecurity and IT support. And I want to thank you again, Truman, for being here. And one last question is, if people want to hear more about this from you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can hit me on LinkedIn, or else go to our website at truetechnical.com.
And I'll put your contact information in the show
Yeah,
so people will be able to access it.
it's I'd love to be able to talk to anybody who wants to see what their business risks could be. Moving forward. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks
Excellent.
again, Truman.
Roger, thanks so much.
Okay. See you all next time.